to do better at
Hello, good
other
afternoon.
machine problems. Pero ito yung
Ito,
tumatak sa
Mars.
akin dahil na-highlight yung recurring mistakes sa pagko-code ko
Hi, Mars.
and how should
Baka
I
sabog yung boses
better
ko.
observe yung best practices for Java, ganun.
Being able to work and having the opportunity to collaborate with a talented team.
Natuwa po ako sa mga activities dahil afterwards parang may marirealize ka na kaya pala siya ginawa dahil may gantong lessons, tapos may mga realizations din na ay sana ganito pala ginawa namin, ganun.
I think the people, kasi masyadong approachable yung mga tao dito and they are very kind. As a shy type person, I'm very difficult having to adjust in many different environments. And here at Orange and Bronze, it is me kasi approachable yung mga tao and I can be just myself.
What I like best about ONB's instructors are the instructors themselves, because this is the first time I've seen a CEO teach the students himself.
They are both kind and compassionate, yet they are strict and disciplined. They enforce strict rules in essential concepts in programming that help us nurture and grow. And yet, despite this strict behavior that they enforce on us, they are still yet compassionate enough to listen to our questions and always ask for our insight. And on top of this, they also do not hesitate to correct themselves when in the event that an intern tells them that they made a mistake or they made an oversight on a certain thing. And this humility really helps me see a new light in our instructors.
What I like about ONB's instructors is that they're dedicated and they really do their best to answer your questions, to explain the concepts to you in a way that you understand, and mostly they really care about their students.
They are really strong in their fundamentals, and they have industry experience from all over the years that they have been doing here at ONB.
Their dedication to providing comprehensive and hands-on training, sharing their knowledge and experience to us. They are approachable and whatever problems faces during the training process.
Is that in a way that it is challenging.
It's fast, it's challenging, all at the same time.
The process was very yung courses and also and ways where you can review kung natutunan mo na nga ba talaga. You're able to evaluate yourself and when you make mistakes or realization.
Feel that we are not going to be left behind whenever we concept that Mr. Callan is explaining.
Well, it's a different used to when with training. Also has been an experience since we are the internship period along with my peers. What I love is that when it's open, it really how I've been learning and training in
You should be prepared as you have a lot of information to take in and a lot of fun. And don't be afraid of asking questions. The people around here and your questions proudly.
I think this is a huge opportunity because comparison to other internship programs, my batchmate got to experience like upfront that you have to do this, you have to tasks po kagad is from the level of dapat kaya. Comparison po kay O&B naman is yung program. So yung mga courses, thoroughly siyang i-apply talaga in development. Other than that, things po kasi na haven't been taught to. For example, din po science sa mga schools is to basically, you have to learn this term, you have to apply this, ganyan. But other than that, like, paano na kapag nasa real world, apply siya efficiently, paano yung coding practices, paano yung pakikipag-collaborate mo sa mga tao. And with this O&B internship program, I got to experience lists that I said kanina.
Don't hesitate. Try here, and especially those students who are, because I believe that ONB provide that the learning path, the training, and also the strong instructors are very. So I be an intern here because it would be.
They should because we as students really that ready for the corporate world, and the additional tools, the standard of the industry, be familiar with the environment. All of these all at once here at ONB. I am very after I step out of this internship program at ONB, I am very ready for.
If you want to be challenged, and if you are really passionate about what you are doing, ONB, in here you will grow, but most importantly,
the games they make us play, because their activity, it's like they're instilling you through active participation theory. It's participation of each member in learning.
For me, the most is actually one of the machine problems. I was actually able to do better at other machine problems, pero ito yung highlight yung recurring mistakes sa pagko-code ko, and I better observe yung best practices for
to work and having the opportunity to collaborate with a team.
Natuwa po ako sa mga activities dahil afterwards parang may marirealize ka na kaya pala siya ginawa lessons, tapos realizations din na ay sana ganito pala ginawa na.
I think the people, kasi masyadong hindi. As a shy type person, I'm difficult having many moments, and here at Orange is me kasi approachable yung mga can be.
What I like these instructors are the instructors themselves, because I've seen a CEO teach themselves.
they are passionate, yet they are strict. They are rules in essential grow, and yet despite this strict enforce on us, they are still yet compassionate enough to listen to our questions for our insight. And they also do not correct themselves when in the event that an mistake or an oversight on a certain thing. It really helps.
What I like about they're dedicated, and they do their best to answer your questions, to explain the concepts to you in a way that you'll understand, and mostly they really care about their students.
They are really fundamental industry that they have been doing here at
Dedication to comprehensive and hands-on sharing their knowledge to us, and also whatever questions that arises during this.
My process is that the courses are arranged in a way that it is challenging.
It's fast, it's challenging, it's fun, all at the same time.
I think the overall process was very well structured. Nagustuhan ko po yung exercises, machine problems, a checkpoint where kung and evaluate yourself and have more meaningful realizations dun sa
And that be we don't understand any concept is explaining or our instructor is.
It's a different style that I've been when but has been sharing an experience since during the internship period along with that it's when it's open it really has how I've been learning and training in ONB.
Of information to take in, and also have a lot of fun, and don't be afraid of asking questions. As such, the people around here is friendly and approachable, and their questions proudly.
I think this opportunity because internship programs of my batch, you have to do this, you have to do that. Spoke agad. Dapat kaya comparison po kay ONB naman yung program. So yung mga course mo i-apply development. Other than that is there are things haven't been taught to us. For example, normal way po of teaching computer science sa mga school. Basically, you have to learn this term, you have to describe this term, you have ganyan. But other than that, like pag nasa real world ka na, so paano mo ma-apply siya? Paano yung coding practices? Makikipag-collaborate mo sa mga kailangan mo ma-hone. And with this, I got to kanina.
Don't hesitate. Try here and apply. Are aiming to be world class. If that ONB company can provide path, the training guide, instructors are very super to be an intern here because
They should definitely take it because we are not really that ready. World provides the additional tools. The standard of the industry has to be familiar with the environment. They are of these all at once, and I that I'm at ONB. I am very ready for the corporate world.
Want to be really passionate about what you are doing, that you take ONB's in here you will, but most importantly,
Go to PowerPoint, go back to the start. Let's do it now. First, oh, sorry, Chrome, yeah. It's not at the start of the scene. I'll go back to the beginning.
But hindi pa dinner, it's not yet dinner time. We're trying to adjust the presentation, but we're going to officially start in a couple of minutes. So just for formality's sake, so good afternoon again. Welcome our 50th Enablement Seminar, PSIA's 50th Enablement Seminar. This afternoon, we will be privileged to learn from experts, not just on Agile Business Planning 101, but also on building competencies for IT business analysts. So I will be your host this afternoon. I'm Ivy. I'm the secretary of PSIA. And first and foremost, I would like to thank our partners this afternoon. The 50th Enablement Seminar is made possible in partnership with Orange and Bronze Software Labs, our host, our venue host here. Thank you for this wonderful training area for letting us borrow it this afternoon. And we also have our partners from the Department of Information and Communications Technology, the ICT Industry Development Bureau. So to start things off, may I request everyone to stand up for the national anthem.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Now, before we officially start our program, I would just like to share some house rules, both for those participating online and here on site. So, online participants, videos and microphones are disabled all throughout the seminar, except during the Q&A portion. So later during the Q&A, you'll be given a chance to unmute yourself and to ask your questions through Zoom, or if you prefer, you can also do it via chat. So there will be a Q&A portion after each topic of the presentation. For online attendees, as I mentioned, you can post it in the Q&A tab, or you may opt to raise your hand and we will give you a chance to unmute. And then the secretariat is recording this enablement seminar for documentation purposes. And for those here on site, kindly mute your phones and laptops for the duration of the lecture. Thank you. All right. As I mentioned earlier, our seminar this afternoon is brought to us by our Broad Software Labs and the Department of Information and Communications Technology, ICT Industry Development Bureau. So to give us a message of support, let us all hear from the Assistant Division Chief of the Benchmarking and Promotions Division of the ICT Development Bureau, Mr. Jihad Pangol.
To the Philippine Software Industry Association President, and of course our good friend, Jonathan De Luzuriaga. To our resource speakers from Orange and Bronze Software Labs Incorporated, Mr. Adam Breen and Ms. Michaelle Tabilin. And of course, to the attendees of this highly relevant enablement seminar, a pleasant day to all of us. The Department of Information and Communications Technology is always ecstatic to work with PSIA in bringing meaningful projects for the software and IT services industry. The 50th iteration of this Software Industry Enablement Seminar is a testament to the synergy between the government and its invaluable private sector partners. We at the ICT Industry Development Bureau constantly look for opportunities to work with our industry partners to implement projects like this that empower the Filipino talent to not only keep up with the demand of the global market, but more importantly, elevate the quality of the entire country's software and IT services industry. We are pleased to once again provide support to this activity as we have done for a few times in the past. The country's software and IT services industry is crucial in attaining the lofty goals set by the IT BPM Industry Roadmap 2028. According to the roadmap, the software and IT services industry should be generating around 9.6 billion US dollars and employing 280,000 full-time employees by 2028. The roadmap also emphasizes that the industry is witnessing a shift towards the delivery of more complex services, such as cloud, cybersecurity, and product services. This trend in the industry highlights the need for innovative approaches in making sure that our businesses are able to adapt and thrive. Agile business practices can be highly advantageous in this fast-paced, technology-driven industry. We are very fortunate that our friends from Orange and Bronze Software Labs are eager in sharing their expertise in this subject matter. The country needs to take advantage of the growing demands of the software and IT services industry. We must put emphasis on equipping our workforce with relevant skills and competencies to position the country as a highly desirable destination for investors in this industry. Activities such as the Enablement Seminar provide us with opportunities to learn new skills and best practices in the industry. Although the industry goals seem daunting at first glance, they are certainly attainable, and we must make sure that we do our best to hit these targets for the benefit of the Filipino people. I cannot understate the DICT's appreciation for our private sector partners in working tirelessly with us in leading the country's digital transformation. Let us continue working together in providing opportunities for learning to our workforce. Rest assured that your DICT will always be supportive of your efforts in uplifting the lives of our countrymen. On behalf of Director Emily Delfin of the ICT Industry Development Bureau, maraming salamat po.
Very much, Mr. G. Agawal. And once again, thank you to the ICT Development Bureau for our sections. Now, let's proceed to the first part of this afternoon's seminar. Our first speaker is the Chief Operations Officer of the Orange and Bronze Software Labs. He was born and raised from the Gold Coast, Australia, so land down under. And he has more than 26 years of experience in technology consulting. And to teach us this afternoon on Agile Business Planning 101 using story mapping to communicate and build your vision, we have with us this afternoon Mr. Adam Breen. A round of applause.
Very much PSIA and of course all the simple audience for not me and also welcome to the Humble Training Center and thanks to coming along to this. Getting here. Okay. Hello everyone online as well. Thanks for joining. I did there are quite a few of you. We'll have Q&A at the end of onwards, so if anyone has questions. So without further ado, today I'm going to talk about a few things that I've learned about Agile release planning. There's one technique in particular that I'm going to talk about, which is called story mapping. It was originated by Jeff Patton, amongst other people. Jeff wrote a book. However, at the same time, Jeff was doing these sorts of techniques at ThoughtWorks and other consultancies will come up with similar things. So Jeff gets majority of the credit because he wrote the book and kudos to him. It's great. So just a couple of starting points. Obviously, well, hopefully it's obvious to most of you that the Agile 101 is one development process. So we're going to be talking about today we're going to be talking about this part, right? So we're not going to be focusing so much on what teams do during the sprint. We're going to be talking about how to develop during the process. And indeed, our business, product ownership, and everyone else who are stakeholders or potential users of the solutions that's being built can have input into that planning process. So there's problems that we encounter often when we're trying to do Agile, right? We all want to do Agile. It's been around. Alan started talking about it in 2005 at least. Everybody thinks it's a great idea, but for some reason, not everybody seems to execute well in an Agile format. With maybe bad old days when we were doing what everybody understood that it's built, that it's tested. All you had to do was what was in the requirements list. And why don't we do what for anymore? Well, it turns out that it doesn't work very well. It doesn't work very well, except for telling the business when something's going to be finished. Right? So waterfall is all about timeframes and planning. It's very, very good at that. Unfortunately, people end up building the wrong thing most of the time. So when we try to do Agile, we've got this idea of a product backlog, and maybe it's even prioritized. Trouble with a backlog that's even prioritized is that it's kind of hard to visualize what's going on. What are we actually going to build? We might have a look at some of these stories here. We can see they're talking about moving emails, text email, email. We're talking about calendars now, future appointments, something. So we can start to develop some kind of concept. Maybe we're building something like a workspace. We just email, we just calendar. Like let's roll this down. We have more stories. Stories. So it's kind of hard to visualize the big picture. But in this development projects, this team doesn't understand what they need to build. Chances are they build a thing. So how do we help the team and make the business agree to what it is that we're going to build? And I think that we want to be building iteratively following the Agile process as well. So how does that feel when it comes to planning? How do we do this Agile iterative development process and at the same time have some kind of label, some kind of concept of when we expect things to get done? So releases can help. This is a screenshot from one of my favorite PM tools. It's called Pivotal Tracker. Works really well for some teams, works really badly for other teams. It's very quick to use, so I use it for making my slide really smart. And what it does is it says, okay, here's everything that's in the sprint backlog, and here's this, right? So we release the line of sand, and it says, okay, here's all the stuff we're planning on building, we're going to ship that, or it's going to be releasable in some way. So that helps because now we've got a concept of what we need to do first, or the bits that should go into that first place. But it doesn't really help us paint the big picture still. Like, are we building Google Workspace? Are we building Microsoft Outlook Desktop? What are the people building? Who are the users for this?
You maybe higher.
Not all the
Higher.
Higher?
But higher, yes, please. Yes.
How's that? Better? Right. Sorry, folks. Hopefully you can hear me now. So it looks helpful, but still don't paint the picture, right? Now, let's be interesting stats just backing it up. Everybody loves stats. 80% of stats are true, and not. But anyway, 66% of technology projects end in partial or total failure. That's based on analysis of 50,000 projects globally. 66%. Right, so that's an amazing amount of money that's wasted. Right? I can think of examples of banking industry back home in Australia. I've seen $200 million projects fail simply because they got to the last moment. Client's team said, no, not launching that. No, we haven't gone through the proper process. No, that's not good for purpose. $200 million US. And there are many examples. It's not an isolated example. So this number's real. 44% of projects fail due to a lack of alignment between business and project objectives. So now we're starting to act this big picture concept. We haven't painted the big picture, and the right people haven't been saying, yes, this is where we want to go. That lack of alignment is what's happening with projects fail. Okay, because you get to the end, you build something, but then it's the wrong thing. And just to show a couple more stats, typically 2 out of 3 scope items that people have included in a function requirements document. So that's 45% plus 19%, 66% total. And no business value, very little business value. So what's business value? Right? Business value is about outcomes. It's not about software. It's not about user stories. Well, user stories can help us with that. But the user stories themselves have no value, neither the software. Value of a solution that's sold is in the way that it's used and return on an investment. That return may be measurable in dollars, pesos, or it may be measurable in other ways as well, such as happy customers. So, the reason why we don't really do waterfall so much anymore is people used to hand us big functional requirements document, say, here, go build this, right? And we know, based on those 50,000 projects surveyed, the 2 out of 3 features in that functional requirement spec are down the toilet, right? Global quality. How much more value would we have created by putting the effort and putting into those? Up here is always often used category. Right? So this is how often the features is always, often, sometimes, whatever. And a favourite management writer or author of mine is Peter Drucker, who said one day that there is surely nothing quite so useless as doing with great efficiency that which should not be done at all. The red category for itself. So why do software projects fail until it's down let's think about this a little bit more detail. So lack of clear overall product vision is my favorite space. Or just the product vision is my favorite topic when it comes to doing software vision. Like, we don't have a vision in real life. We'll never know if we get there. We also don't know if we're going to make a direction. So I want to go here, but the team's going to go this way. Well, I can go this way. So the purpose of vision is to let you know where you're going, but also where you're not going. Right? So functional requirements are not user stories. Talk a little bit about how user stories are helpful. I won't go into that great detail in this talk, so we'll get onto the story mapping tool. Other talks no doubt will talk about how we write a user story. But user stories must address different types of users. I like to call personas. Trouble with the word personas is that as soon as you say those business people, they start thinking you're talking about marketing. Right? Start talking about marketing, they get distracted and they don't realise that they're actually talking about details that matter in terms of whether the user story is applicable to this individual or to this individual. Right? Might have two different personas or demographics or other characteristics of these people that determine whether or not this feature is going to be used by the person, where it's going to be used to content. So personas matter. And this feeds into making sure that we've got the scope. The other bugbear for me is standard or no prioritization. So what's the right way to prioritize? That's a great question. I'll give you some insight into that today. Again, it's a whole topic unto itself. I'll give you a hint. The right way to prioritize is not just to ask one person to do it for you. You need to have a system. So not all requirements are necessary, is covered. Some requirements should have to be built at all. We can't build everything right now. So what should we do first? Who's ever been in a situation where you've had a project manager or business leader or a product owner, and you've said to them, well, you know, what should we build first? What can we leave out? Well, the question is, what can we leave out? Can't leave out anything. Oh, really? Okay, so that can't be true because we can't build everything right now. We know that we've got to get to a release before we build everything. Right? So what should we build first? So personalized thinking about that. Quickly, let's think about the service a little bit just to illustrate our point. This is something we've been working with in LP recently. We've had a financial inclusion related project that we're proud of. I won't go into the details of the item right now, but these are quite valuable from that actual solution. So here we have Tita Virgie, she's a Sari store owner. Tita Virgie, as you can imagine, is perhaps not the most technically savvy person in the world, which might be, but in this case she's not. And here we have Goody Joey, who's on his smartphone, it's professionally dressed, it's probably like room or 59, probably pretty tech smart, probably uses this right. What are some characteristics of this people that might be relevant? So Tita Virgie has no bank account. Literally has no bank account. According to the BSP annual banking report, I believe that the statistic is currently about 55% of the Philippines population still. 55% of the Philippines population has no bank account. They may have Gcash account, but it's still not 55% of all of those people with Gcash account. When you also time banks, people with South and with the rest of Asia and the rest of the world. In a similar vein, perhaps for this reason, she has no bank account. She has limited ID. She definitely doesn't have driver's license. She probably doesn't have the skin. She may have postal ID, but she may not. Right, so how does
Can you
we have
put it higher? Can you put the lapel higher?
How about if we just switch it on? Sorry, folks. She's on demo day. How's that? That's 1, 2, 3. That's 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tita Virgie's unbacked, has limited ID. She has a bar phone, not a smartphone, so it's not likely for the channel or something like that, right? So she's not going to be going browsing websites, right? She's not going to be installing Android or iOS apps. And she, surprisingly enough, prefers face-to-face interactions. So that she can get assistance by talking to a service thing, right? That's the one thing that she's very good at. She still doesn't have any phone. Have the Joey, who has a bank account and salary gets paid into, has a driver's license, uses the latest iPhone, right? And he prefers to do everything online. He actually doesn't want to talk to somebody. He wants to push buttons on his phone. Right? So two very different personas. And you can see actually through differences between them, they're differently able in terms of any solution that we might provide. Now, in the case of this time, we work in financial inclusion. One of the stories that we were enabling for both of these personas is to apply for loan, to apply for financing. So, to get UMS for Sarah she wanted affordable finance loans to buy it and stop the store. And maybe Joey's doing something with an online e-commerce business. He wants to buy stock too. So Tina Virgin travels along a different user journey as compared with Joey. She must, right? Because her touch points, the interaction with any solution built actively with them. She doesn't have a smartphone, she doesn't have a laptop, and she doesn't have documentation. So the journey that she started to travel to get the smartphone is going to be different. In order to enable financial inclusion of both of these personas, which is the circle that our clients taking, product vision needs to accommodate both of those journeys. So that means additional scope. That means that if we only had a set of functional requirements that said apply to loan, as business process that says submit verification, enter amount of pesos that you want the loan for, right? Get notified that you're going to get a loan. Well, what does that look like for Tina? What does that look like for Java? Pretty different. So that means there's additional scope in order to service the same requirements. It's where requirements are helpful in determining the available vision. Right? It needs to know the bigger picture, and that is basic users. That's what I'm talking about. Source. So I want to know when my loan has been approved. Let's say that that's the story, right? So as Tina Virgin, I want to know which my loan has been approved. How's that going to work? Well, she does have the bathroom, so she could receive an SMS telling her that she should rock up to the fitness center and get a payout. Right? And then she can go to the fitness center and ask the client for a cash payment. And that's how she gets it. For Joey, he's got a smartphone, he's installed the app. He receives a push notification where it's excited, hey, I've got money, checks his balance. Yeah, you might spend money on my stock, you might e-commerce. Again, two very different journeys, but with the same ultimate result, which is the two people get loans. So from vision to reality. If only we had perfect vision upfront, if only we could imagine everything perfectly and we didn't need to go out into the world and understand what's happening in the world or understand these. Well, if we want to paint Mona Lisa, we just start at the top, work our way down, right? It doesn't really matter which bits we do because we already know exactly what these look like. And we can do these iterative sprint things that people talk about. I'm sure we have a good pattern. Now, is that going to happen in the real world? No. It doesn't work with paintings. It doesn't work with software. So how it actually works is we're trying to envision sufficient. Try to create a vision. Okay, well, I want a painting or a portrait, and it's going to be of a pretty lady, and she's going to be outdoors. Okay, great. So I've got the concept now. So in my first attempt, I might sketch them up, and for those who can't see, in the first attempt, she put her hand in front of his face. Now maybe that was his vision to start with, but when he sees it, the painter, in this case, he realizes it's not the right painting. Okay, she's covering the face, but actually not the emotion of the smile. The smile of the Mona Lisa is famous card by painting. So he spots that he's made a mistake, learns from the mistake, moves the hand, she's got her hands down in front, see her face. So okay, we've applied the learnings. Now let's make it good enough, right? Good enough to see the picture. It's not going to be the final picture that gets in the loop or gets, wherever this is like the painting. But it's good enough that we can actually put that in front of people and say, is this painting you'd like to buy? Do you think she's pretty enough? It's the right backdrop. Okay, so we confirm some learnings. And then we make it better, right? We fill in more color. Painting starts to take shape. eventually it's ready to ship. Right? So this is the idea of actually doing agile digital development, where we learn as we go, and we progressively build up functionality, starting with what's most important, like what's good enough to begin with, so that we can start really making sure it's validated that what we're building is correct. And that validation loop is the key difference between agile and waterfall. So here's the story mapping frame. Here's how you can start doing with a little bit of MASH. My preferred way is to have really a big wall, put up some, I call it butcher's paper in Australia, I don't know if you call it here. Big sheet of white paper or a big whiteboard. It might be as long as that wall, depending on how big your vision is. And then what we do is we map the user's journeys, or user's journey across the top. You could think of user's journey as a business process or a collection of business processes like that enable the vision. Personally, I prefer thinking in terms of the UX approach, which is called this journey. So that's the cost. Now is how critical are the features that we're going to build. Don't worry, I'll build up this picture so it's clear all the feature. So we start with the things that are always there. Sit down this big leg. Sorry, that's my biggest not having. Yeah. So this is what's always going to be essentially. This is the element of the paper together, which is the outline laid with some colors, ways to start to build a picture of flag. Okay. This is what we can't do without. We're going to have a picture of flagging, it's color, backdrop. Right? So that's always used. Then we go to what's frequently used, right? So the things that are not used every single day in the application, but are going to be used very often. Right? So there are some things that are very important, but they're not used every day. But that would be interesting conversations with the listeners, with the stakeholders, etc. Because you need to force people to agree. Right? One way to agree that some things are all the time, some things are frequently but not every time. Right? This is the beginning of being able to separate priorities. So then further down the list, we have things that are sometimes used and then things that are seldom used. Yes, if we want to build those up, and we prefer to spend more time learning about things that are going to be frequently used and sometimes used to make it better. Here's a template for user journey map. This is one that I tend to use. This is the UX technique, which applies very conveniently for product vision as well. So we might take Tita version as the persona, the snap, and we might say, okay, so what's the first phase? First phase might be that she's becoming aware of that chief deadline. Next phase might be applying for them. We're doing steps up, which is to apply, etc. It's like a number of steps involved in that phase. But getting the most compassion. That's just I like this template because it helps us to think in terms of the persona, right? So how is Tita Virgin feeling when she becomes aware of life? She might be quite excited, right? She might be ready on the spot to go and take action, take the next step of the business process. Right? How's Clear Johnny feel when he comes to the world? It's like, well, maybe it's ready for the maybe other things to do, excitement, step. So it's an empathy tool as well as a vision tool. I won't go on to all the other details of UX. And now I encourage you to go to IXTF or Interaction Design Gallery and check out their course. It's short and it's cheap, and it's really worth going through understanding this process. Next slide, please. So once we've worked out the user's journey, then we paint that picture across the top. Now this is This is the Google Workspace thing I was talking about. So the user journey is in 4 phases here for this app. Okay, so you might start by organizing these things. So we might manage our email, manage our calendar, essentially we might manage our options. It's like a broad. So then within the phases, we have what you might think of as epics of that sort of agile. Basically, these are going to be columns down the page. So this one says search, file, emails. It's manage email, we've got compose email, read email, delete email. So these are big that contain stories that we can talk about with our users. We talk about the differences between personas, as well as the steps. Manage calendar has view calendar, create appointment, update appointment view app. Manage contacts has create contacts, update contacts, delete. Okay, so starting to sound like Google Workspace for a couple of slides. Next slide, please. Okay, so now down vertical axis, we have the criticality of these features. So coming back to how often we're going to use these stories, but we're going to do them always. We're going to do this horizontal grouping, but we use them frequently, but not always. Next, we use them sometimes. Okay, they're important. We might have selected down here as well, but just to the So always is about being able to see it working. Okay? Being able to see it working. So when we've got the picture of the Mona Lisa, if we have a sketch of an outline, we can see that the hands are in the right place. We can see that there's an outline of the background, right? You can see that this is going to be the right portrait. Can't confirm all the colors, right, or she used one up here. But we can see that there's a details to the right portrait. So one of the things that always going to use that help us to see these things work, right? Then similarly, after we've done the work to see it work, how can we make it better? Right? How can we find things that people are frequently to implement them as well, layering on top of it, great work. Then make it cheaper, right? So in Agile, we talk a lot about releases, potentially shippable at the end of each sprint, right? What I mean here by shippable is that we've got a product that's ready to go. Okay, so we put the finishing touches in, we put in the sometimes features that are going to define us in the market as different now. We've got Google Workspace, we've got all the more fundamental features, but now we've done some things to differentiate us maybe. That's what it takes to ship. So then, okay, so here are some stories. Yeah, something to do with Zoom, so we realize that obviously we're not doing. So for organizing, well, we always need to be able to do for searching, this search on keyword, right? We always need to be able to do that for search. And for filing emails, well, we'll always need to be able to move emails around, like its definition of filing, okay? And create subpoints. It's really going to file. So we always will need those two things for filing emails. The compose email will need to be able to create and send based. And we might, as a product owner, we might say that we also need to be able to send in RTF format. So maybe people can include all the ones basic side. Right? That's a product ownership decision, but that's the decision. This product owner. I won't go through all the rest, but you get the idea that if you can't do these things, then you just don't have any sort of implementation. It could be called search or file, obviously ready to plan, etc. So when we're thinking about what should be the backlog, right? We're working out what are the things that might be the must-haves or the always, what are the things that are frequently and what are the sometimes, right? It's important to do a couple of things. Find all of the stories. One is don't forget the unhappy parts, right? So we always focus on what's happening. Like, how can I go and file my send an email? Yeah, I've got an email. Oops, let's say reset the password. Okay, I'm not going to do this. It's not exciting for the needs to prove it. Similarly, non-functional considerations needs to be considered at the start. Right, so do we need to handle 100,000 data pieces? You better tell your team up front, because otherwise they're going to build you something that's cheap rather than data. Okay, because actually it's not to the least necessary to make people outcome if you ask. If you're not asking for that outcome, they're not going to build that for you properly. Right? Because it's more expensive and takes time. Right? Just needs to be able to run on a smartphone with only 4 gig RAM. Okay, that would be a common type of smartphone for your banks, especially for the connection inclusion. Doesn't need to work in low or no bandwidth scenarios. That's the fact definition. Probably yes in many cases. At least we need to think about this. Right? So we're not thinking about these requirements of the system itself as a persona. We're not thinking about the scalability. Also, often the business is going to give you a really big chunky story. It's going to be one with devs that look at it, oh man, 30 story points to one story, right? So of course we want to break it down. So how can we break it down? Right. So let's break it into smaller stories so that it has to build and validate. So we might say, okay, well, what's good enough to get things going? We need to be able to assemble it, make it sure. So let's think that that's slightly now, right? Let's assemble it. Okay. What would make it better? Well, it would be better if it had HTML, it would be better if it had RSCF, better if you could schedule it, right? Probably don't need to be able to schedule send in the very first release, right? We don't need to be able to schedule send to prove that we can send email, right? So it's not always sometimes. What we make it better, the best that we can do. This is one way to prioritize. To do the things that make it good enough to get things working first, so that we can test it. Okay, so a little bit more on the engineering side. See it work. It means always. See it work. We always want it to work. Right? It doesn't matter if we're in sprint 1 or if we're in sprint 100. What we build always needs to work. Okay? But in sprint 1 is often where it doesn't, because we're not giving enough thought to what's required to understand what. So again, absolutely. So here, what it's talking about is a vertical slice through the system. Okay, so depth of room. Think about the database layer. Think about it could be AD's cluster. Think about the CI/CD pipeline, like having a shipment. Right, all of these things that are necessary just have a simple user interface come up on the screen. Some web browser, phone, somewhere. But look at the things that are needed to demonstrate that one single completion. That's what we need. That's what we need to start with. That's what it takes to work. An example of that here is access control. So we're talking about password listing. I'm damn sure I don't want somebody sending emails who's not me with my email address. So that tells me right away I need authentication. Okay. If I build something that lets you send email, but it doesn't make it proof that me, that doesn't work, right? Yeah, you can send an email, but you can send an email. That's the wrong story. Yeah. So all of these forms of vertical slice, I call it. Anybody ever develop, say, all that works on our machine? Right. So all the time in RP, when we're consulting, we see client dev teams demonstrating local host. Right, for the technical people in the room, that means demonstrating on their own laptop, not demonstrating something that's being deployed to the infrastructure that's going to run. This does not prove that it works. Right? Running on local host does not prove that we've built something that works. Right? Because you can't run on your laptop times for users in the system. Therefore, it's not the right test. It's not validating to build something that works. And Agnes is going to come get you with the problem. So thinking about the system as a persona, actually there's a lot of stuff we need to take into account. Right? There's a lot of stuff that's involved in seeing it work. Okay, we might think about DevOps. If we're building cloud native, we're probably doing Kubernetes, right? Do we have a Kubernetes cluster set up? Right, where's the cluster going to be? Is the suppliers hosting it? Are we hosting it? Like, where is that infrastructure? It's on a server on somewhere, right? What is going to prove that what we're delivering is working in those terms? Do we have a way of releasing CI/CD pipelines? It's our reason we like to automate as much as we can. Do we have a dev and a test environment ready to go? Like, are we giving the devs a way of testing what they're building? It's not going to interfere with testing on the waiting as it's ongoing. And are we sure that the environment is the same as what we're going to choose to production? Production environment will be this frequent thing, but we don't need it right away to see it working. We might make some assumptions that the production environment will be the same for a very close mirror of what we're doing testing, for example. Observability, especially if we're doing cloud native with Kubernetes, it's very important because if you've ever tried to go and get the logs out of a node or a cluster of Kubernetes, it's non-trivial. We need to make sure that we've got this set up from the beginning, so that if we're testing something in depth, we find out what's broken. If the testers are testing something, they find a problem, we can go and find out why it's broken. We have access to the cluster operating system logs, access to the application logs, access to resource entries. So we know if the application is running too hot, right? Are we overtaxing the infrastructure that we set up? We need to know that, right? Because if your product owner or your business has told you need to be able to handle 100,000 business a day, well, you need to know that you can handle 100,000 business a day, right? So you might start with an automated smoke test, this test automation solution, right? So that every time you release, you know, you've released the same thing, it's expected what's on the release environment. And then ideally, we fairly quickly after that automate performance tests so that we can prove that the damn thing does scale. Right? Security, often asked for, should be, again, part of seeing it work. Right? So we talked about authentication, but what about things like data protection? We worked on a wonderful, I say that with a grimace on my face, we worked on a wonderful project a while ago in R&B where we only found out about 12 weeks into building a know your client, a KPC application for the foreign business that they wanted, what they called end-to-end encryption. Now we thought, sure, okay, well, we'll make sure that there's a TLS tunnel, we'll make sure we've got authentication. No, they wanted the data to only be accessible by somebody with a particular double key. So it didn't matter what went into the database, that had to be encrypted with that private key, how to get the public key in the first place, and then like, how do we test that? Right? So if we don't have their public key, how do we know that what when it is the right thing that's coming out? Much more complex than what we thought to begin with. So it's a very good idea to work out data protection requirements up front. Vulnerability scan, it's probably something that everybody should be doing all the time. At the minimum, you want to know if the software has any CVEs coming up, so if you're using an out-of-date Java framework or out-of-date Tomcat or any of the other myriad of possibilities. It's very easy to set up tools like Bright or Sneak that are going to scan for these kind of things as part of the automated tool chain. Right? This is part of seeing it work, because if your system relies on an outdated framework or an outdated library, you put that into production, it's not going to be secure. It doesn't work. Right? And then we should think about hardening as well. Because if we're going to be testing on the assumption that this environment that we've set up is the environment that we're pointing to, we're going to be validating through things like performance testing. Well, if we come along with client network level hardening or server level hardening, or insert all these other weird wacky network routes later as an afterthought, again, we haven't tested the thing. We don't know that the thing we built still works. Right? So this is an interesting conversation to be having with your business. If you have an IT silo in your business that is independently responsible for the way that things get deployed into production, this is a conversation you need to have in the first sprint. It's part of the scope. You need to get that agreement. So, a enough sermons on DevOps. So we start with user journey across the top. We've done all the see it work bits. Then we're going to make it better with these features that might be frequently used, not all the time, right? So I'll step through one. So if we're talking about manage email, when we compose an email, we can already create and send a basic email. We can send RTF email. Now we might decide we're going to be able to send HTML email. And as anybody who's ever tried to build that from scratch knows, it's more complicated to get it right and have it working on email clients correctly. And we might decide that we'll let them use email borrowing. So again, maybe we'll build email to Google Workspace. Okay, but these are things that will make it better, right? Starting to color in maybe. And then sometimes, right? So sometimes when we're composing emails, we might need to get an address, email address for contacts, or personally I'll probably do that infrequently. We might need to send attachments, right? We don't send attachments every time. We may not even be sending attachments frequently, but to be able to ship an email product, we absolutely need to be able to send attachments. So we validated all of this stuff first, and now here's all the stuff we need to do to actually give it to the real end users at the end of the day. So this is a way of thinking about our vision from a user perspective in stages. Okay, well, that's the big thing. The people who have better eyesight in the room might notice it says release 1, 2, and 3. So here's how we get to the release planning. So over here we've got release 1. Now we've got into this with the team. We've prioritized the backlog for them that went into the PM tool, and I started to put story points on all of these cards, right? As a product owner, we do need to develop the skill to do this at a very general level, because it's too slow to estimate every single card, hundreds of thousands of them in the PM tool overnight. It just doesn't work. Teams should be focused on building stuff. Right. Now, some people do backlog grooming or backlog refinement. That's a valid process which you need to fit into your sprint cycle somehow. But in terms of being able to develop a roadmap, my perspective is that it's the product owner's responsibility to understand the tech enough, work with the team enough to be able to put some kind of high-level estimate, at least on the columns, right? And that will let you work out high-level how all this is going to pan. But let's say we've got all of these estimated on the team with it's easy to decide. Right, so release 1, we've got 17 stories, 51 story points, same. Okay. Then release 2, okay, with 14 stories, the team says it's about 56 story points there, right? Release 3, 11 stories, 44 stories. However, the way that we got to this is by prioritizing in terms of see it work, make it better, shift it. So then, when we're doing sprint planning, and this is the key idea here, release 1 might not fit into one sprint. That's okay. So this is where the terminology gets a little bit muddy. Okay, we're not talking about whatever you was releasing at the end of sprint 1 as this release, same release. Some of them, but cycling is all the same place. Let's show you the team very awesome. Okay, so we see plan. Okay, the team says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So stories about what each story points you get to that and really think that you know it. Great, got well, okay, we have got 9 stories with 27 stories. Okay, those it's pretty good, especially on the first sprint. So then we might say for a sprint 2, well, what's remaining for this 1? It was 8 stories there. It's about 24 stories, those 8 stories. Okay, so we did 27 points last time. 24 seems like a pretty reasonable velocity to sprint 2. Let's have a crack at that. Okay, great. So we did 27, and we got those 24 sprints. Right? So now our average velocity is around 26. That lets us, as a product owner, start to evaluate what the time frame is going to be based on the team's actual velocity. Okay, we might have imagined something slightly different to this, and that's the skill thing with product owning. working with a team over a long period of time, where this product owner might be able to manage this more effectively without needing to do sprint 1 and 2. But the reality is probably sprint 1 and 2 to see what the yield loss of this real solution will be. Last time we built a banking app, now we go to an email system, they're not really the same shape. Okay, so it's just loss of rights to 10. Okay, so with this 2, right? It's 56 storage points total. We can do about 26 storage points per release. That means we need 2 sprints, right? Release 3, 44, again, roughly 2 sprints. So that tells us that we've got about 4, maybe 5 sprints remaining to get through the scope. And that gets us to Henderson. Okay. In reality, that's probably a pretty short project. I'll take it. What's all the spacing about in the slides, so it's very clear range. The other thing that is illustrated there is including the user types in this story map, right? So the story map is a tool for shared communication, for shared understanding, right? So it's important to see, okay, well, here's Tita Virgie, right? She and Kuya Joey both might be sending emails. It's going to be a bit different too, right? But we need to be able to see the personas as they relate over the big picture, right? We've got a business process that starts with the customer, that finishes with the back office, right? We need to know that this is the back office, and this is the front end of customer, right? So it helps us to create a shared understanding. And the system is the user, as I mentioned earlier. So last but not least, I'm not going to go into that spec time, but the ultimate outcome from the product owner's perspective, product owner's responsibility to the business and to their stakeholders collectively, which might be business users, might be customer support users, dev teams, and finance, people who are paying money, CEO. The product owner's ultimate responsibility is to deliver the roadmap. This is going to be release line, because we need to know at a high level from each team what's going to pop out roughly when. Right? Now, roadmaps are deliberately very high level. Roadmaps not equally actionized. Right? The idea is to give people a sense of when things are coming. Because if people say here we're building website, landing page, and product recommendations, well, the marketing team is going to need to be involved. So they need to know that their resources are going to be required in queue. But we're not doing anything that department cares about queues. So they know they can go on with other projects. Example, roadmaps are very important, and maybe I'll work with all of them. But you can't really create a roadmap without having gone through that story process, or at least explain. Further reading, this book, go and buy it, it's really good. You can read it in a couple of weekends. Jeff Patton's legend. He works at ThoughtWorks. That's just refer to ThoughtWorks. Certainly, that's one of my spirit animal companies. And then product roadmaps we launched for those who are advanced learners. The product owners, my mentor who's currently wrote this, he is also a legend, especially in product nationally. The slides there from Bruce in the early days, which ended up becoming this book eventually. As I mentioned earlier, you can go to the ISD and check out the custom journey maps. But also, don't want to, can't afford to hard to buy the book. You can go to Jeff's blog online and read a bunch of good resources. And that's it. Also, I think to one of the questions from viewers at home or investors.
We have some questions about this. We will have questions.
Questions?
But none from online.
Okay.
So it may be
They might use this in the future. Nobody? Okay, that's good. That's good sign. Okay, well, my contact details, you're welcome to reach out to me by email or WhatsApp if you like, anytime. I'll be that's run courses on this material across the Agile journey. We have help services, organization coaching,
Hello. All right, thank you so much, Sir Adam. And right now, I think it's about time we have a short break. So we have snacks outside. You may proceed outside, get some food, and come back here, and then we'll be back in 20 minutes. So for section 2 with Ms. Michelle, we'll be back in 20 minutes. So let's take a break shortly first and have some snack there outside. You can check
Mute natin. Hello? Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. We're gonna have a short break. We'll be back by 4:45. So let's wag na natin i-switch yung
the activities and the games they make us play. Because when you experience their activities, it's like they're instilling the values in you through active participation. So it's not
and having the opportunity to collaborate with a talented team.
Natuwa po ako sa mga activities dahil afterwards parang may marirealize ka na kaya pala siya ginawa dahil may gantong lessons, tapos may mga realizations din na ay sana ganito pala ginawa namin, ganun.
I think the people, kasi masyadong approachable yung mga tao dito and they are very kind. As a shy type person, I'm very difficult having to adjust in many different environments. And here at Orange and Bronze, it is me kasi approachable yung mga tao and I can be just myself.
What I like best about ONB's instructors are the instructors themselves, because this is the first time I've seen a CEO teach the students himself.
They are both kind and compassionate, yet they are strict and disciplined. They enforce strict rules in essential concepts in programming that help us nurture and grow. And yet, despite this strict behavior that they enforce on us, they are still yet compassionate enough to listen to our questions and always ask for our insight. And on top of this, they also do not hesitate to correct themselves when, in the event that an intern tells them that they made a mistake or they made an oversight on a certain thing. And this humility really helps me see a new light in our instructors.
what I like about ONB's instructors is that they're dedicated and they really do their best to answer your questions, to explain the concepts to you in a way that you understand, and mostly they really care about their students.
They are really strong in their fundamentals and they have industry experience from all over the years that they have been doing here at ONB.
Their dedication to providing comprehensive and hands-on training. They are also passionate in sharing their knowledge and experience to us. And also they are approachable and willing to answer whatever problems or questions that arises during the training process.
My opinion about the ONB's process is that the courses are arranged in a way that it is challenging but doable.
It's fast, it's challenging, it's fun, all at the same time.
I think the overall process was very well structured. Nagustuhan ko po yung pagkakasunod-sunod ng courses and their content. as also, and the exercises, machine problems, parang there's always a checkpoint where you can review kung natutunan mo na nga ba talaga, and you're able to evaluate yourself, adjust, and ayun, have more meaningful learnings when you make mistakes or realizations dun sa process.
Feel that we are supported and that we are not going to be left behind whenever we don't understand any concept that Mr. Callan is explaining or our instructor is explaining.
Well, it's a different style that I've been used to when we say the word training, but it also has been a refreshing an experience since we are open during the internship period along with my peers. What I love is that when it's open, when it's collaborative, it really has improved how I've been learning and training in ONB.
You should be prepared as you have a lot of information to take in, and also have a lot of fun, and don't be afraid of asking questions as such. The people around here is friendly and approachable, and they will surely answer your questions proudly.
Definitely, personally, I think this is a huge opportunity because, can I say this, like in comparison to other internship programs, my batchmate got to experience like upfront that you have to do this, you have to do that. So yung tasks po kagad is from the level of dapat kaya mo na yan, ganun. In comparison po kay ONB naman is, ayun nga po, may mga training programs. So yung mga courses, thoroughly siyang na-explain before mo i-apply talaga in development. Other than that is, there are things po kasi na haven't been taught to us in schools. For example, the normal way po of teaching computer science in mga schools is to basically, you have to learn this term, you have to describe this term, you have to apply this, ganyan. But other than that, like, paano na kapag nasa real world ka na? So, paano mo ma-apply siya efficiently? Paano yung coding practices, paano yung pakikipag-collaborate mo sa mga tao, yun yung mga kailangan mo ma-hone. And with this ONB internship program, I got to experience those lists that I said kanina.
Don't hesitate. Try here and apply, especially those students who are aiming to be world class, because I believe that ONB company can provide that, the learning path, the training guide, and also the instructors are very superb. So I encourage them to be an intern here because it would be a memorable as well.
They should definitely take it because we as students are not really that ready for the corporate world, and ONB provides the additional tools, the standard of the industry to be able to grasp, be familiar with the environment. They are teaching all of these all at once here at ONB, and I am very confident to say that after I step out of this internship program at ONB, I am very ready for the corporate world.
If you want to be challenged, if you want to improve, and if you are really passionate about what you are doing, I suggest that you take ONB's internship program. In here, you will grow, you'll struggle, but most importantly, you will learn.
The activities and the games they make us play, because when you experience their activities, it's like they're instilling the values in you through active participation. So it's not just theory, it's also the participation of each member in learning.
For me, the most memorable part is actually one of the machine problems that we did. I was actually able to do better at other machine problems, pero ito yung tumatak sa akin dahil na-highlight yung recurring mistakes sa pagko-code ko and yung how should I better observe yung best practices for Java, ganun.
Being able to work and having the opportunity to collaborate with a talented team.
Natuwa po ako sa mga activities dahil afterwards parang may marirealize ka na kaya pala siya ginawa dahil may gantong lessons, tapos may mga realizations din na ay sana ganito pala ginawa namin, ganun.
I think the people, kasi masyadong approachable yung mga tao dito and they are very kind. As a shy type person, I'm very difficult having to adjust in many different environments. And here at Orange and Bronze, it is me kasi approachable yung mga tao and I can be just myself.
What I like best about ONB's instructors are the instructors themselves, because this is the first time I've seen a CEO teach the students himself.
They are both kind and compassionate, yet they are strict and disciplined. They enforce strict rules in essential concepts in programming that help us nurture and grow. And yet, despite this strict behavior that they enforce on us, they are still yet compassionate enough to listen to our questions and always ask for our insight. And on top of this, they also do not hesitate to correct themselves when in the event that an intern tells them that they made a mistake or they made an oversight on a certain thing. And this humility really helps me see a new light in our instructors.
What I like about ONB's instructors is that they're dedicated and they really do their best to answer your questions, to explain the concepts to you in a way that you understand, and mostly they really care about their students.
They are really strong in their fundamentals and they have industry experience from all over the years that they have been doing here at ONB.
Their dedication to providing comprehensive and hands-on training. They're also passionate in sharing their knowledge and experience to us. And also they are approachable and willing to answer whatever problems or questions that arises during the training process.
My opinion about the ONB's process is that the courses are arranged in a way that it is challenging but doable.
It's fast, it's challenging, it's fun, all at the same time.
I think the overall process was very well structured. Nagustuhan ko po yung pagkakasunod-sunod ng courses and their content also, and the exercises, machine problems, parang there's always a checkpoint where you can review kung natutunan mo na nga ba talaga, and you're able to evaluate yourself, adjust, and have more meaningful learnings when you make mistakes or realizations dun sa process.
Feel that we are supported and that we are not going to be left behind whenever we don't understand any concept that Mr. Callan is explaining or our instructor is explaining.
Well, it's a different style that I've been used to when we say the word training, but it also has been a refreshing an experience since we are open during the internship period along with my peers. What I love is that when it's open, when it's collaborative, it really has improved how I've been learning and training in ONB.
You should be prepared as you have a lot of information to take in and also have a lot of fun, and don't be afraid of asking questions as such. The people around here is friendly and approachable, and they will surely answer your questions proudly.
Definitely, personally, I think this is a huge opportunity because can I say this, like in comparison to other internship programs, my batchmate got to experience like upfront that you have to do this, you have to do that. So yung tasks po kagad is from the level of dapat kaya mo na yan, ganun. In comparison po kay O&B naman is, ayun nga po, may mga training program. So yung mga courses, thoroughly siyang na-explain before mo i-apply talaga in development. Other than that is, there are things po kasi na haven't been taught to us in schools. For example, the normal way po of teaching computer science sa mga schools is to basically, you have to learn this term, you have to describe this term, you have to apply this, ganyan. But other than that, like, paano na kapag nasa real world ka na? So, paano mo ma-apply siya efficiently? Paano yung coding practices? Paano yung pakikipag-collaborate mo sa mga tao? Yun yung mga kailangan mo ma-hone. And with this O&B internship program, I got to experience those lists that I said kanina.
Don't hesitate. Try here and apply, especially those students who are aiming to be world class, because I believe that O&B company can provide that, the learning path, the training guide, and also the instructors are very superb. So I encourage them to be an intern here because it would be a memorable as well.
They should definitely take it because we as students are not really that ready for the corporate world, and O&B provides the additional tools, the standard of the industry to be able to grasp, be familiar with the environment. They are teaching all of these all at once here at O&B, and I am very confident to say that after I step out of this internship program at O&B, I am very ready for the corporate world.
If you want to be challenged, if you want to improve, and if you are really passionate about what you are doing, I suggest that you take O&B's internship program. In here, you will grow, you'll struggle, but most importantly, you will learn.
All right, good afternoon once again. Is everybody back inside? And all those joining us online, are you back online? Good. Can you hear me? Kindly provide feedback if the audio is good. All right. Apologies again for the earlier audio problems. So we'll try to do better for the second part. So for our second part of the seminar, we have with us the professional management consultant of Orange and Bronze. She also started her career here 8 years ago in Orange and Bronze as a business analyst. To share with us the key competencies to build an efficient and effective IT business analyst, please welcome Ms. Michaelle Tabilin.
Thank you, Ayn. And good afternoon, everyone. Can everybody hear me? If you could, please. All right. Thank you for confirming. So, as Ayn mentioned, I'm Mitch. I'm a professional management consultant here in ONB. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about myself and basically contextualize the topic that I've chosen for today that I wanted to share with everyone in the room. So I thankfully also mentioned that I started my career here 8 years ago in IT in particular, but overall I've been working for 10 years already or 11. The pandemic really did a big shift in the space-time paradigm of my mind. But I started my IT career here in ONB. I was working before as a research analyst in FactSet, which is a financial company. And how I transitioned into IT back then was that I became a POC for an internal automation project. Back then, I didn't even think about the word automation. I just know that they wanted to do some adjustments in the process that we are making. And then they tapped me as the one who would be doing the business requirements, providing them what we are doing. And the first time that I encountered the phrase test plan creation was also during that project. So suffice to say, even though I studied business administration in college and, started working in finance, being exposed in these projects and tasks of a business analyst made me, captivated me into what later on would be a long career of being a BA, into a product specialist, product owner. I've even been a manager at some point, and now I'm a project manager here in ONB. So that's where I'm really going to get the topics that I would be sharing with everyone from. Like, these are the competencies that I think if you're someone who would like to start a career as a business analyst, who is considering shifting into a business analyst career, or even going beyond the business analysis role, but would like to build on the foundations of business analysis, these are the competencies that I think would be best to start with, or at least should be present in order for you to claim that you've built enough to be called a business analyst and an expert in that field. But first, before we go there, I think this is a common contextualization practice is always to provide definition just so everyone is also aligned. So I took the definition of a business analyst from IIBA's BA Book of Knowledge, which is something that I entice everyone who would like to start on their BA careers also to check as a resource. So according to BA Book of Knowledge, a business analyst is someone or anyone who performs business analysis tasks. So what are those tasks? In a nutshell, these tasks involve discovering, synthesizing, and analyzing information from a variety of sources. So take note that it's a variety of sources. It's mentioned there, and I hope I would also be able to tap into those different sources later. And these are also the ones responsible for eliciting the actual needs of stakeholders. So it's important for us to remember that it's the actual need of the stakeholder. So sometimes, stakeholders would come in, similar to what Adam mentioned earlier. Sometimes they would already have this big stack of requirements that they just want us to process, quote unquote, process, develop, and deliver. But as a business analyst, you don't containerize your tasks or your role into just receiving these requirements. You also have to make sure that you are eliciting the actual needs of the stakeholders. So, since I mentioned in my title that I'll be talking about competencies, I also wanted to define and differentiate what competencies are versus skills. So, I've checked in various resources. It would be, it's in my notes. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to put it there. But it also includes IIBA's competency model. Competency is made up of knowledge, skills, and behavior. So this is the best way I think we could illustrate that. You have the knowledge, you build on that by improving your skills. And then it also matters how you behave or how you basically materialize those skills with your stakeholders. And having this layered sort of onion on top of the knowledge and skills and behavior, this is what builds your competency. So, for example, if you're trying to say that you have competence in requirements gathering, you should have at least the knowledge in what the requirements gathering techniques are. So, for example, you know what an interview is, you know how to conduct workshops, or what is the difference between those. And then in terms of the skill, you should be able to know how to select which one is the most apt. So, it's like you have the knowledge and you also have the wisdom of applying those things, those techniques. So it doesn't matter even if you have memorized in your mind what the different techniques are, but if you don't know what to or how to select the proper one, depending on the circumstances you're in, you can't really claim that you have the skills of those techniques, right? And of course, it also matters your behavior towards that knowledge. So if you say that you are doing constant requirements gathering because you see that, you acknowledge that requirements always evolve, but you're not someone who consistently does documentation, meaning you just do the technique, you selected the correct one, but the value of doing those techniques, you weren't able to capture whatever those values are, which is the documentation, then it's not really a competency that you've built for yourself yet. And it means that you'll have to grow or identify where you could improve on this competency. So that's basically the context of how I came up with the different competencies and the different skills also that we will be tackling moving forward. So I hope it's also clear, but if you have any questions, you can leave it out later at the end of the session. All right. So of course, I was thinking, why would I want people to learn what these so-called competencies are for BAs? I think first and foremost, especially if you're a BA, are there any BAs here except for Isa? All right, so you can just share this with other people. But even if you're not BAs yourselves, I think it's still important, especially if you're working closely with business analysts. So primarily, if you're a BA, learning these competencies or what these are would help you identify what your strengths are and what your room for improvement are. So it's very similar to like whatever role you're in, learning the competencies that would make you like an expert on your field would really help you identify these strengths and rooms for improvement. So it, of course, obviously, it also helps build your career progression and the people around you as well. So even if you're not directly a BA, but if a BA is working, for example, for you, it would be easier for you to have a basis on how to evaluate their performance because you know that they are or they are not yet competent in such fields. And of course, even for example, for headhunters, recruiters, it helps you know which candidates are suitable for the role of the business analyst. So in particular, and throughout the lesson, of course, I'll be talking about IT business analysts. You would see from the BA Book of Knowledge that actually it's not really always limited to IT, but of course, I can't really speak for the whole like business analyst. So just to set the expectation of everyone, the context is within the IT industry, of course. All right. So for this session, I've identified 4, and honestly, there are many more competencies that can help you build your career in being an IT BA. But I wanted to focus on 4 for now. So primarily, I'll start with planning and organizing, which honestly is something that I think every BA would start with. And then, of course, there's requirements management, the analysis of those requirements, and finally, managing your stakeholders as well. So for planning and organizing, mainly it's maximizing time to gather sufficient data. In terms of requirements gathering, management, it's more of keeping track of changing requirements. I think Adam tapped on that earlier. Requirements constantly change as well. In terms of requirements analysis, I would say that this is the core of being a BA. It's literally there in the name business analyst. So the analysis itself involves a lot of things. And I've only identified a few that I think would be very helpful to whoever you're working with as a BA. And last but not the least, definitely, is of course stakeholder management. So you want to ensure that there's collaboration and engagement with your stakeholders, and it doesn't happen just as the start or at the end. So there's always that collaboration and engagement. So to start with, planning and organizing. So I mentioned that this is all about maximizing time to gather sufficient data. So I say sufficient because you can't always exhaust everything at one session. So, I mean, you can't force people to stay with you 24 hours just so you would be able to get all the data, right? But in every session, and in every, say, meeting that you set or workshop that you set with your stakeholders, what matters is that you are able to gather sufficient data that is valuable in terms of how the requirements should be that will be used by the rest of the development team. So in terms of time management, it's really important to identify and involve the relevant stakeholders. So I want to emphasize the part of relevant stakeholders because basically, if we recall what a stakeholder means, it means anyone who has a stake on, let's say, the product or the solution, right? But if we're going to consider that anyone in the, let's say, the company or the enterprise could claim that, you know, I have a stake in that because that affects this process and so and so. So in order not to be overburdened, and for you to say that you are actually good in planning and organizing, you should also be able to identify who the relevant stakeholders are for a particular session that you want to set. And then you also have to identify the time needed from the stakeholders. This is really important. It seems like it's a petty thing, but based on experience, most of the stakeholders would usually express their appreciation in terms of setting up the correct time that you take away from them, basically. Because one, they are still sacrificing part of their time, but on the other hand, the time that they sacrifice means that they would be able to get a lot more value in the future, and there's like a valuable ROI for them. So in terms of the time needed, sometimes it might take the whole day, especially if you're towards the start of the project where everything is just coming in. The picture is not yet that clear. For example, in the Mona Lisa picture that Adam shared earlier, probably at the top left tile yet. So if you want to have a bigger or a clearer idea of what the requirements are, it might take longer time. But as you move forward in the, say, in the engagement or in the project, you could identify the recurrence of sessions and then have shorter time frames for those. So it's really important as a BA because it also shows that you respect the time of people. So showing them that you have time management is very important for them. And then the techniques, which is something I touched a bit earlier when I did an example of the competencies. So you also have to identify what is the most suitable technique for requirements gathering session. So again, if you're towards the start of the project, you could do workshops. We actually do that as well for our clients that we started to engage with. And it's usually very helpful because, you know, they usually have the freedom to let you know, this is the process that we are imagining, or this is the process that we currently have, and this is the process that we want to go. So the as is and the to be that they want to have, which is really, really helpful in identifying what they want to achieve in the future. But there are also some, sorry. Yeah, but there are also some other types of requirements gathering techniques, which based on my experience was also really helpful to me throughout. For example, interviews and shadowing. So it's not mutually exclusive. Usually they come hand in hand. So if you have someone, you know, especially if it's a really new project and you have no idea, the best case usually is to identify someone, ideally a user of the solution that you're going to build or you're trying to improve. Basically, it's a representation of like the persona that Adam talked about earlier. Shadow them, don't stalk them, just shadow. Identify the process that they are doing, document that, and then with that, you could ask questions already. So it's sort of like an interview session with them already as well. And of course, if you did your proper time management, they would also feel like empowered and heard with whatever concerns that they may have in the process that they are doing, which you can consider as requirements as well. So of course, there's also email. We don't want to discount that. There are some times wherein simple questions could be asked via email or chat, especially if you also consider the time of the stakeholders wherein they're not always that available all the time. So yeah, I won't discount emails. Sometimes it's better to send emails than, you know, set a meeting. I've experienced having someone scheduled a meeting with like 20 participants, and you know, we just all answered one question at the same time, and it felt like this is something that could have been an email. Yeah. So that's still requirements gathering. As long as you gather sufficient data, as we mentioned earlier, that's still a technique. Right. So I'll go now to the second competency, which is requirements management, which is still very much related, of course, into planning and organizing. So this part would be more of keeping track of changing requirements. So you've heard about making sure that you identify the relevant stakeholders and then you identify the correct techniques. And it's not like mutually exclusive that for this project, we're only going to do this specific technique, or we're only going to do every 2 weeks. It could always change as long as you are able to organize those things. But again, it also matters that you also have a documentation which you can keep in terms of what the requirements are. Because as I mentioned earlier, the value that you will be delivering always comes from the data or the requirements that you're gathering from your stakeholders. So one thing that I usually think about in terms of documentation is that it should be sufficient as well. So what does it mean? There are times wherein people would usually focus on documentation, and we all know that in the agile we don't really usually focus on the documentation because we focus more on the working software. But there are instances wherein you can't really set aside having a documentation. And these are the considerations that I've encountered so far. So most of the time, there are companies who really have their own documentation policies. And this usually comes hand in hand with the succeeding bullet points as well. So there might be regulatory requirements on why we keep such documentation. There are times wherein the team isn't mature enough, for example, to just rely on user stories, and they would like to see more detailed documentation. And then there are also times when companies would have their external auditors or even internal auditors in their IT teams that would look at what is the process that we have for example, for credit card payment, because we want to know, because it impacts data privacy of customers and such. So it's always important if you're a BA to contextualize and, you know, identify what are the certain factors that would tell me what kind of documentation I have to maintain. And for the next one, it's somewhat related to what Adam also shared earlier, prioritization. But this one, again, this is more on the scope of the evolving requirements that we have. So in terms of prioritizing what you have to elicit, for example, or validate with your stakeholders, the two things that I usually consider are whether the company's goals change. Is there something that needs more attention now in terms of refining the requirements, and the requirements themselves in terms of, for example, there's a regulatory change, or there really is a difference now compared to like yesterday, for example. There might be those factors that would tell us how to prioritize what we want to elicit or refine in our backlog. So again, this is not necessarily the same as prioritizing the backlog itself, because well, I would expect that the product owner would have better say on that. But as a business analyst, you can't do everything all at once, just as what Adam also mentioned earlier. So you also have to prioritize what you think would give the most value to the company. And that would depend usually on these two things. So those are planning and organization and requirements management. So it's really more of like sort of coming together now. And the next part, I would say, is the core of our being as a business analyst. Because as I mentioned earlier, the name itself is there. If you're a business analyst, you should be expected to do some analysis, not just documentation, not just gathering, not just doing sessions. You have some value that you could contribute to the company. And that comes in by doing the analysis itself. So two major things that I think are important or are relevant when it comes to requirements analysis would be problem solving and visualization. So I mentioned earlier, problem solving. Sometimes companies would come in, they think they already have the requirements written out and you just have to do it. But it's not always the case. So as BAs, part of our reason for existing is making sure that we are solving the right problem statements. So I'm not saying that they are wrong problem statements, but in terms of identifying what the problem really is, and be able to provide an actual value versus just a perceived value, you should be able to identify the correct problem statement. And as much as possible, the goal also is to identify the root cause. Because usually, if you have the problem and you identify the root cause, it leads to a more valuable solution for you. So it also lets your stakeholder know as early as possible that, you know, if you ran through a red light, it's not because you're late for work, but it's because you forgot to check it. So we have to address that that problem. How do we ensure that you won't forget to check it, for example? So the 5 whys technique is something that is always useful for me in identifying the actual problem statement of stakeholders. So yeah, that's there's still a lot more about problem solving, but I can't dig too deep into them now. But yeah, you can take note of the 5 whys. And then comes visualization. This is very important, and based on my experience, it's something that has really helped me also build my career, because I think it's a known fact that humans take in much more if they are more like if they see something rather than just reading it. So for example, if I put all these information in a wall of text, you might be able to read them, but it might be harder to recall compared to, for example, a use case diagram, which is one of like my favorite ways to start analyzing processes. So you're able to identify the users. So they're obviously the ones that are represented by the stickman, and what their actions are, which is the ones which are the ones in the circles. So from this point, you can already it already makes sense that this is an online shopping system, because the customer can view items, make purchases, and do other things. But you are also able to identify the other users of the system that may be impacted by this online shopping system. So you would know, for example, from this example, that there is a service involved. There are some other like actual people who are identity providers, credit payment services, and even PayPal. So even here, the systems are laid out as users because they interact with the system. So it's really helpful, especially if you're still someone who's new, say in the user story format. This actually really helped me before, because it's easier to transition to a user story. Because as a customer, I should be able to view items in order to blah, blah, blah. So it's easier for you to create the requirements themselves if you know what can be done in the which system and who does them. So very easy to understand if it's visual. And then, yeah, the next part, which I think is pretty much there ever since like in the beginning as a business analyst, is being able to create process flows. So there are a lot of ways or lot of like starting points wherein you want to create a process flow. But for me, it's always being able to identify the as is process and the to be process. So hand in hand with knowing the correct techniques, if you're also able to visualize the processes, for example, if you shadowed someone, you don't just write down the process or their tasks. You would be able to visualize it better if you could draw a process diagram for them. And because you can, or if you are able to identify and visualize the as is and the to be diagram, it would also be easier for you to perform gap analysis. So again, another topic on their own, but I just wanted to share really nice examples in case you don't know what process flow diagrams are. So on this part, on the left part, this is actually an example of a BPMN 2.0 process flow. So it's very rigid and standardized type of process flow, which usually if you're documenting and sharing it with, say, regulatory bodies, Usually it's in the BPMN format. But for me, I personally usually start with the one on the right, which is regular process flow based on UML. This is basically the format that we also learned from high school, if you also started there. Something that's usually common, whatever process flow diagram you use, is that you will always have like an indicator wherein the process would start, where the process would end, representation of decisions, and of course, the different steps of the process. So once you know those things and those representations, it's easier for you to understand as well. So for example, the one on the right is quite easy to understand because there is a phone call that was started, and you can just easily follow these things. And I think even in government offices, they have incorporated having these process flows so that if you're someone who comes in and wants to do a transaction, it's easy for you to know as well what you want to expect in the process. So it's always like the best part to start with, and like the meat of being a BA is being able to visualize processes as well. And the last one that I wanted to talk about is something that Adam also mentioned earlier. So it's about the journey mapping, or for me, I called it customer journey mapping. So if you were able to remember what Adam mentioned earlier, it's really about having an actual user, an end user of your system, and making sure that you consider their motivations, what happens to them while they undergo the process, and making sure that those user experience feedback that you might identify in this journey mapping is also considered in your requirements and part of the requirements that you manage. So I think Adam has went through the different steps. Just to recap, this is a bit different format, but it's basically the same. It has the same elements. So at the top, well, for this example, at least, they also included information about the persona. And then you have the different steps. There are also phases. So like a different color would be a different phase in the process. And then you would have your different touch points. So for this part, I think they also made it visual, like how newbie Natalie would be feeling throughout the process. So you would know whether they're like going down or up. So again, visualization is always better. And then you would be able to identify also what the thoughts are of newbie Natalie while she undergoes the process of, what is this? Being a new patient. Wow, what a coincidence. So, coming into the hospital, and then undergoing the different procedures and stuff. So yeah, it's very helpful because you always have these user requirements, the functional requirements, but sometimes user requirements would also involve experiences that weren't considered there before. Yeah, so visualizing and diagramming, they're really, really helpful as a BA. No matter how senior you are already. Yeah, and then there are also other formats or other diagrams that are useful. But I think that there's already too much that you can also, try to learn them by your own. But anything that involves process mapping, for example, I would really say that these two are the most helpful, UML and BPMN. And then making sure also that you consider your customer journey or your user journey, right? Okay, now I'm going to the last part, and honestly, one of the most challenging parts of being a BA, but you can't remove as part of, I would say this is also a core part of being a business analyst as well, It's making sure that you're able to manage your stakeholders. So again, stakeholders are people who have a stake on the project, product, or any solution that you're working on. So based on my experience, there have been many times wherein I thought, for example, that it would generally involve, say, one department of the company. But towards the end, once you've done your planning, your analysis, you will be able to identify that there are more relevant stakeholders than just the people that you initially talked to. And of course, they always want to be involved in the decisions that you're doing to their product because it impacts the processes that they own as well. So for me, one of the things that have helped is being able to continuously update who your stakeholders are. And I mean, being able to sort of document who they are, what their stake on the, say, the solution is, what is their ask, for example, being able to relate the different requirements to the stakeholders as well. And especially if you know and you've noticed that the requirements are constantly evolving, which is also a known fact in life. So if they're evolving, so does your list of stakeholders. So there are times, especially when it comes to enterprises, if you're working on a big priority or a high priority project for your company, sometimes you would learn that, you know, the CEO or the other C-suite level people have started to put direct stakes on the project and not just sponsor them. So you should be able to anticipate as well, like how high up does the value of this solution go. And you have to ensure that you have continuous engagement with these people, even if they may not be the type of stakeholders who, you know, as much as you want to involve them because they're actually the ones who would be able to answer what the requirements are, but they're not just that engaged. You still have to put an effort and make sure that you continue at least reaching out to them. So we don't want to feed the zombies. It's something that here in OMB is like sort of our motto. But we also have to ensure that you don't sacrifice the value of the solution. That's why we have to make sure that we are engaging with our stakeholders because they're the ones who will be able to help us validate if the solution we're working on is actually valuable. And lastly, you will also have to always validate the requirements that you've gathered. It doesn't end at, you know, making very colorful, very detailed process maps. It is a cycle, and for it to become a cycle and for it to be iterative, you have to validate the requirements that you have gathered. And to do that, of course, you will have to continuously engage with your stakeholders. So that's why it matters. And just to recap, those are just 4. And as I mentioned at the start, there are still more competencies in the business, being a business analyst. And, you know, it would take probably not just a week to go through them. But these are the things, or these are the competencies that I think someone who wants to delve deeper into being a BA, build their career, claim to be a professional, could start with or could ensure that they have built their skills on these competencies already. So some of those competencies, top of mind, that you could also build on would be solution design and evaluation. So as a business analyst, it doesn't end at just gathering the requirements and just creating the processes. You're also involved in the solution itself. That's why you're part of the development team. And you're also someone who could help with the evaluation of the solution. And then there's also the business strategy assessment. So it's a bit highfalutin, but honestly, it's really more of knowing what the business strategy is, what their goals are, and being able to assess if it makes sense, if it does give value, anything that they want to change in their strategy. And of course, tools and technologies. So especially if you heard the opening remarks of from the DICT earlier, they did mention that we are hoping to delve deeper into, for example, cloud, information security. So it's also something that you could build on as a business analyst, knowing what these things are, what are the emerging trends, for example, what are the different tools that help you give more value to your team, and so on and so forth. And there are a lot more. There's honestly a lot more. And probably we could talk about them more in the future as well. But yeah, those four are the ones that I could include today. All right. So of course, there's a lot of information that we've shared over the past few minutes, but something that based on experience as well, I want everyone to watch out for. I'm saying this, of course, since I was a BA, but I think it applies to everyone. You have to always watch out for context switching, especially if you're responsible for solutions that are impacting multiple systems. Because I've been in a situation before wherein, as a business analyst and having been able to identify the different systems that would be impacted by the solution that I'm analyzing, I sort of dip my toe into the world of the other systems as well, and ended up being like spread too thin over too many systems. So the ideal situation for a BA is that if you have something, if you're involved in a solution, make sure you focus there first. It's not a bad thing to be able to be knowledgeable about other systems as well, but you just have to make sure that, you're able to contribute valuable inputs and outputs as well, and not just being spread too thinly over many different aspects. And then it also happens usually if you're wearing multiple hats in one project. So if for example, even in an internal setup, which happened to me also before, because we ran out of project managers. This was like 5 years ago. I was supposedly a product owner, but I had to wear the hat of a business analyst as well. And then, of course, I had to wear the hat of a project manager for like the first few months of the engagement. And it was at the point of being unbearable already. So that's something that I think a BA should also watch out for. Why? Well, basically, if you're doing context switching, and this is also something that we usually like is a common knowledge in the industry, if you're not like able to maintain that certain cadence or velocity of your thoughts, even if you're already doing documentation and you haven't gone that far yet into like making things tangible in a real document, and it's all in your mind, anytime that someone would ask you for help for another thing, it's not that easy to recall all of these things that you have already mapped in your mind. And speaking of hats, it is a fact, however, I know this is quite contradictory, but there are instances wherein you can wear many hats. So you can be a product owner, you can wear the hat of a product owner who's usually responsible for the definition of the requirements. Like they're usually the people we go to as BAs to know what the requirements are. And they're the ones who are usually responsible for backlog management. You can also be a project manager who's actually responsible for scope, resource, and timeline. And you can wear the hat of any stakeholder who wants to know more about the solution. But what I want to share before I end is that you can wear the hat, of course, if you want to consider, empathize with these different people. If you want to know how to provide like the best answers to any questions they may have, It's okay to wear the hat, but it's not necessary for you to take on the mantle, right? So if you're a BA, at least for me, if you want to focus on building your career, it's better to focus on being a business analyst at its core first, build those competencies, and then probably in the future you can jump into this different roles. But at least, especially if you're at your building phase of your foundations, it's not always necessary to take on the mantle. Otherwise, it would really burn you down faster. Right. And that's it for me. So I hope you had some takeaways from the session. But if you have any questions like from online, please let me know. Maybe I'll start with the online while the people here think.
So we have many questions.
Wow.
So one of the questions was, among the suitable techniques for requirement gathering, which one is more effective and efficient to use?
Okay. So I think it's important to be able to contextualize first before identifying the different techniques. So actually, even for from the BA Book of Knowledge, from IIBA, there are many techniques that they have identified, and I think it's not as exhaustive. But you have to know what are the environments to identify the techniques. So I'll try to like go over these. These are just 4. I would honestly say there might be at least 20 techniques out there in the BA Book of Knowledge. But if you want to identify which is the most suitable, you'll have to consider the other items that I mentioned in planning and organizing, like how many stakeholders are there, for example? Would it make sense to do a workshop if there's just one person? Wouldn't it be better to do shadowing, making sure that the focus is between you and her and the process that they're doing? Or if there are 20 stakeholders, for example, does it make sense to have them in one room altogether? Say they come from 5, 6 different departments. Would you say that it's an effective workshop just because there are a lot of people? So identifying like which is the most suitable technique would have different factors to consider first before you can say that it's the most suitable. Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope that answers.
So next question is, how important is the role of a sprint planning? Do you think a project manager can survive a sprint planning without a sprint?
Okay. So as a project manager, well, honestly, I would consider the business analyst to be part of the development team, and they are a key aspect in terms of sprint planning. I would say that they are the ones who would be able to answer in case there are any clarifications from, say, the development team who are doing the estimates in the sprint planning. And, even if you're a project manager, it's nice if you have the background, if you have the skills of a BA, you might be able to answer. But it's usually the business analyst who is the subject matter expert for the requirements. And so I would say they are very important in sprint planning. So if you have a BA in your team, make sure that they are part of the sprint planning, because it contributes to having, for example, estimates from the development team to be more accurate based on the requirements that you are giving them, or the BA is giving them. Yeah.
Next question is from Richard Villantes. What's the
Hi,
difference between a and a ex professional?
Okay. Thanks, Chard, for the question. So I would say that a business analyst, again, based on the definition that we have, is someone who could incorporate the user experience professionalism in their requirements. But I would say that the user experience professional is someone who is more focused on making sure that the user of the solution that you're doing would be able to would be considered and would be interviewed. They would be basically part of like a source as well of their experience would be source of the requirements and the solution. So again, it's if you're a BA, sometimes or most of the time, you would have your stakeholders that would tell you, these are the requirements that we want, this is the process that we want. But having a UX professional would make sure that you would be able to get the value from the users who would use the solutions themselves, and not just the people who think they know what the users experience should be.
Next question. What are your thoughts on systems thinking?
Well, top of mind is that it's a whole topic altogether, but systems thinking is something that is also very valuable if you're a business analyst, and it's something that should be considered. Like, I would even go so far as to say it's a competency in itself. You should have the skills and the knowledge that should come in when it comes to systems thinking. Yeah, that's top of mind for me. There are a lot of times wherein you have to consider, like, even before when I started being a BA, I had always thought that there's only one system and then there are a lot of actors in it. But especially in the different industries now, I would say, for example, in fintech, systems thinking is very important. You should consider like the different systems that you have in your solution, and it's not just about like focusing on one system or another. Yeah.
Next question is from Julie E. Morga.
Hello.
What do you think is the best way to handle the constant changing of requirements?
Yes, I think just as like in the development team, you acknowledge that there are requirements that come in that change. It's not just for the developers themselves, but also for the business analysts. So you should be like the frontliner, and you should accept as a fact that requirements indeed are changing. So that's like part of the agile mindset that we want to make sure that we, you know, how do you say this in English? Yeah, it's something that you want to make sure it's always on your mind. And as painful as it is, especially when the requirement change is very, very drastic, it also matters that you would be able to communicate how that impacts on your analysis itself. So even if you're not yet at the part wherein you're doing the actual solution or developing the actual solution, you have to make sure that you are able to capture the difference in the requirements, for example, do the planning, the analysis again. So it's like a life cycle in itself. Yeah. So that's how you make sure you are sane after knowing that there are changes in requirements. Yes.
Okay. The last question. For SMEs, how important is it for a business analyst to be able to teach these skills to other members of the team?
For SMEs, I think at least based on my experience, you don't necessarily have to be an expert on these things, but again, it's a competency. At least having the knowledge, which is the core of like the core aspect of these competencies, it should be enough for you to have a BA teach that to you, just so you would be able to understand where the requirements are coming from, because you're the SME, right? These are the expected, these are the details that are part of the solution. These are the expected outcomes. These are the values that could come in there. So there's I would say there's mostly an overlap when it comes to being a BA and being an SME. But if you're an SME, there are also things that you would understand better than an IT business analyst, because truth is, if you're an IT business analyst, you're leaned more towards the development team, but you have the prowess or like the knowledge, you're able to speak the language of the business, but it's still different. So that's assuming if the SME is like part of the business team. So it's important to have these things like skills that are overlapping, because it would help you, you know, establish being a subject matter expert as well. Right. All right, from the room, sir.
What's the recommended career path for a principal?
Sige, sir. How would you define like a principal BA, like in terms of senior? Yeah. I think at least top of mind is that you could either consider being a product owner or a project manager. So those, for those who are online, just to repeat the question, what would be the career, like the career progression for a principal business analyst? The people, like my mentors, mostly have become managers of their own. So they manage their own team of business analysts. Other mentors that I have become project managers, also senior, and product owners. Yeah, so those are top of mind. But honestly, you could also, like, for example, if you're someone like me who didn't really have or didn't graduate IT, it's also like, it could be a bridge to go into developer as well. But I would say that that's the road less taken. Yeah, so it's usually project manager, product owner. Yeah. Okay, people have thought. Okay, all right. If there are no more questions, then I'll end here. Yeah. So thank you, everyone. So Adam. Yes, I'll pass the torch back.
Okay, can you hear me all right? Test, test.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, okay.
So one question, sir. How do you recommend to strategize for cloud migration sprint? Because they have an existing system converting it into cloud. So is it a good practice to identify all sprints, or what is needed first?
Okay, so I think the question is how to identify the scope for a cloud migration. Would that be right? That's a great question. I think that whenever we have the word migration in a discussion, we need to look at current state first. So the way that we approach it in consulting in O&B is that we'll do some kind of an audit. In this case, we'd look at doing an environment audit, a systems audit, probably do an architecture and code audit as well, because we need to know what's the landscape that we're coming from. Because it's only if we know where we are that we can develop a vision for how to transform from there to somewhere else. And so there are tools like transformation maps that we use to actually plot that roadmap from current state to future. Some of the analysis that we would do involves things like maturity assessment. So, for example, what's the current capability level within the client organization in terms of DevOps, understanding of cloud native technologies? What's the readiness level of the solution as it exists for things like containerization, for example, or are they approaching this more as a lift and shift, for example? And is that the right strategy as well? So there's really a lot of upfront analysis that goes into the planning for that. So then based on, let's say that we used a maturity model assessment, what that basically lets us do is to give you a scorecard across 5 or 6 different categories. So team might be one, architecture and code, DevOps readiness, etc., infrastructure readiness. And from there we can identify like where are the biggest problems to begin with, what are the biggest fires that we might need to put out first. So the scorecard would show, okay, so we're at a low level of maturity in this area. And these are the remediation steps that we would need to take. We're at a high level of maturity over here, so there's no need to touch this right now. And we develop a roadmap based on what are the must-haves or the alwayses, if you think back to the story mapping. What are the alwayses that we need to focus on first? How do we get those things in place first so that we've got something that's in the cloud and now we can demonstrate that there's something working, if not the full solution, and then we progress from there. Typically, because you're changing something that's in process already, you don't want to change everything at the same time. So actually we'll make a change and see how that goes. That may have implications for siloed IT, for example. It may have implications for users. Is the solution in the cloud going to be effective for people who are in the province on a high latency connection, for example? You know, are we changing something but changing the wrong thing? So we'd want to do quite a lot of testing in that early stage as well to validate the early assumptions. Hope that helps.
Next question is, any tips on how to convince clients to transition to Agile?
How to convince clients to transition to Agile? Well, it's usually not hard to convince people that it's a good idea, but convincing people of the details of that idea is the tricky part. So everybody thinks that Agile is a good idea pretty much in 2023. Compared with 2002, 2003, when not everybody had even heard of it, right? So everybody wants to be Agile, but are they prepared to be Agile is I think the larger question. How do you convince them to go there? I think that it's a really useful question to ask in a technical audience, because often the biggest part that gets left out of any kind of change exercise is actually the people and the change management part. It's much easier to change hardware and software systems than it is to change people, in my experience. And so part of that needs to be working out what's in it for me, for the different stakeholders and the different groups you have in the business. If you can find out the reasons that motivate them, and you can develop a coalition of the willing, if you will, that's large enough and powerful enough, then I think you can affect change. And you need to do that top down, but you need to do it bottom up as well. Sorry, it's a vague answer, but it's a pretty complicated question.
Okay, I think we have last two questions. Can a project manager also be a Scrum Master? And last is, who is your favorite Scrum Master?
Wow, okay. Can a project manager also be a Scrum Master? Look, that's a favorite question of mine. I think that it depends on the level of Agile maturity within an organization. So I've worked with organizations at all levels of that Agile journey. There are some very sophisticated Aussie organizations in banking and fintech, even in larger banks now. There's been very wide-scale Agile adoption. And it's really fascinating to work with, where you've really got customer experience and user experience, teams actively involved working with development teams to create strategic outcomes, right? It's an amazing space to work in. In such an environment where you have things like self-organizing teams and you have effective product ownership, you have effective product vision and story mapping and all such like good things. In theory, the Scrum Master is a movable role, right? So the way I was taught Scrum is that your job as a Scrum Master is to get fired, right? So what that means is that there is no one person who ought to be the Scrum Master within a mature Agile organization. Unfortunately, that's not always the reality, right? It's not always the reality that everybody is at the same level of Agile maturity. So, okay, so what do? Well, then we find people who have existing capabilities, who have existing skills, and we put them into the right positions, and we try to help the organization transition. But then again, we're back to change management. So my answer to that is what we're doing in O&B at the moment is we're exploring having a consulting, or if you like, a product owner type role. Our expectation is a little bit broader than product ownership, because we want business strategy and all those kind of good planning type things to be part of the mindset in that role. And we have a project manager role, which is to acknowledge that the work of a Scrum Master or a project manager, where we're dealing with lots of stakeholders and we're dealing with a team or teams, there's a lot of day-to-day grind involved in that role. And it's difficult to do the big picture stuff and do the daily grind stuff at the same time. Mitch was talking about context switching earlier. So this is a learning that we've had in our consulting agile journey, if you like. Do I think that in future it would be nice to have self-organizing teams who maybe rotate the Scrum Master role and are all equally capable in self-organizing with the Scrum Master talking stick sometimes? Yeah, I think that would be really great. We're not quite there yet, but I think that we can get there pretty easily. Okay, no more questions? Must be time to go to the bar, right? Okay, thank you. Sure.
Thank you. All right. Okay, thank you once again so much for joining us this afternoon. I hope you've learned a lot from our sessions this afternoon, and thank you also to our online participants. Just a reminder, before we proceed to have our dinner and leave to go home, we will be sending our feedback forms, and once you accomplish the feedback form, we'll be providing you a copy of the presentations and the recording of the entire session. And then, especially reminding all people online to please fill up the form so that you will get the copies of the presentations. Okay, so before we leave, before we have dinner, let's take a photo here up front for all, a group photo for all the people who are in attendance here. And then after that, you can proceed to grab your dinner and then we can all go. Thank you so much once again. Guys. One more.